what in your view is the number one thing that entrepreneurs and CEOs can do to run their business like a saint?
I think you have to take it one day at a time. I think that's very biblical. It ties into the fear factor too, because fear is, I think, the most mentioned word in the Bible. I'm sure that anybody who's ever become a saint or lives like one has encountered that overwhelming amount of fear that they have to get past.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we discover how to run your business like a saint. Two asks for you today. Number one, if you are not already, go and give us a subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so that we can become monetized. Someday we will get there, and with your help, it could be sooner. And the second one is, if you have not already seen it, we've got a new initiative called the Saintly CEO. This is a free weekly newsletter that will help you learn how to run your business like a saint. Each email will have two main components. Number one, a 5-minute read that will help you insert your faith into the way you run your business. This will always be under 1,000 words. And then a short list of Catholic entrepreneurs to help you discover other people doing what you do and learn about their businesses so you can network with other folks. It's totally free, so sign up today. Okay. Today's conversation is with Monika Elling. Her company is called FMG, or Foundations Marketing Group, and she has spent over 15 years helping companies in the wine and spirits industries create brands, grow them, and sell them. One brand that she worked with actually sold for $200 million, and they did this in the course of 5 years, from concept to sale in 5 years. $200 million. So that's a really kind of impressive numbers. You can see she really knows what she's doing. And today she's building her own brand that will be launching within a couple months here. Now, I wanted to have her on to actually talk about something different. I wanted her to talk about her journey of entrepreneurship through the lens of being a mother. Early on in her career, she actually stepped away from her career to raise her kids. Eventually, she would get back into the market and build things as you see today. But I thought it would be interesting to speak with her about this because this is a challenge that female Catholic entrepreneurs need to work through. And I think Monika has a really, really great way of thinking about it. She offers some thoughts on that. She also even shared some business ideas that if she had young children today, that she would pursue because it's a little bit different market, and she talks about that as well. So really fun conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Without any further delay, let's get into the show. All right, welcome to the show, Monika. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very excited to have you. You're somebody who I've kind of admired what your tenacity and your ability to just get things done. Like we met through some entrepreneurship meetups in New York, and I've just really admired like the things you've achieved in your life. So tell us straight into it. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Sure. So I actually grew up in Europe, and my family escaped communism when I was 9 years old. We arrived in the US when I was 10. And my family, generally speaking, has been in the scientific field. So that was how I grew up, questioning everything and never accepting what's at face value and digging deeper. And that's been a lifelong theme for me in everything I've done career-wise. Went to Rutgers University, actually played D1 tennis. That also had a great impact on my life because as someone that is an entrepreneur, the resilience and the focus are elements that, and discipline, of course, that I've taken with me throughout my career. So in that process, I wound up getting married and having children, and 3 children relatively early on when people I knew were still figuring out what they were doing for work. I already retired from official workhood because I wanted to be the one raising my children at home, and we made that decision quite early on. So my initial career stage, which was in advertising and marketing and primarily luxury goods, CPG, came to an abrupt halt as I was raising the children. And why that became significant is because we all have paths that unfold as we live our lives, and we can have our plans and then things happen. And in my case, I was presented with an opportunity to build a US nonprofit, and I did that. And our work was involving the emerging markets and the post-communist era countries, and really developing trade and investment. And so I had the opportunity to build a nonprofit, which fit into my time requirements with the kids. And also at the same time, it allowed me to be active and give back and do the sort of work where I really had an impact. And certainly looking back now, I can say that it was a significant impact because we took in US trade and investment into a region that was undergoing an historic moment. So that also led somehow to me being involved in the wine business, because all the historic vineyards were going up for privatization, the agricultural space across the board. And you had some of the leading wine and spirits companies coming into the marketplace. And somehow I woke up 6 months, a year later, and I realized I'm in the wine business. So that's been what I've been involved in for the last 20, 25 years. And it's taken all my skill sets and pulled it all together into an industry I'm extremely passionate about, that is global by its very nature. It was the first product that was ever traded across countries. So I know people are talking about tariff issues as if this were some revelation. I mean, there were battles back, historically among countries as a result of these trade wars. So I find it to be a fascinating industry. Not many women in it, by the way. So that was a challenge on many fronts, but it really brings my marketing strength to bear. And also my creative side, which I didn't know I had. I actually blend wine, so I make wine for award-winning wineries around the world.
So what are you doing today then? What's your current venture? Because you've done a lot of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about those accomplishments. But what's the current thing you spend most of your time on?
Yeah, so at the moment, I have pivoted my company, which I've been running for the past 15 years, and we are turning into a brand creation company. And essentially, I'm launching a series of products, and the first one is coming out in about 6 weeks. It is a wine that I make in Italy. It has 0 sugar. It's absolutely stunning, and it has really a beautiful, beautiful flavor profile. So we think we hit the sky with the packaging, with the flavor profile, and the idea that something can be better for you because of its low sugar nature is, I think, something that's going to resonate with
Yeah.
customers.
No, it's definitely a hot trend right now. I appreciate that. And then going back on your career, can you mention some of like the biggest accomplishments you've had, like the companies that you've helped them build their brands and sell them or whatnot? What are the coolest things that you've been able to work on?
I have to say, one of the coolest ones for sure was my very first client, because I decided to go out on my own and I built my own website, put it out there, and optimized it well for search. So that was helpful. And we had an inquiry coming in from Alaska. And that's as far as you can be in the United States. I'm in New York, so they were in Alaska. And about 6 weeks after, I found myself on a plane to Anchorage, one of numerous trips I made there, as the project was to create an Alaskan vodka brand and facility, distillery, and all that. And we built a multi-million-dollar facility. It was not a straight shot upwards. It had its down moments, it had its challenges, but we created a stunning brand that won awards right out of the gate, double gold in top competitions, beautiful design. And essentially, that distillery today is something that's part of the, I guess, Alaska tour when cruise ships go in and when tourists go to Anchorage.
Yeah, it must be pretty rewarding to help. I mean, I guess Anchorage maybe is now a relatively known destination for people. I'm assuming like this was like a big part of helping like draw tourists in. There's probably all these things that you get to be a part of, and the storytelling behind it. It is a product, but it also has kind of this draw to it that wants people to kind of
100%.
come and check it in. So, no, I think this is really cool. So then broadly speaking, if you were to summarize your the time doing your own business was primarily helping other people create
Right.
and launch
So,
brands, and now you're doing your
yes.
own.
Yeah, so FMG is a brand development agency that I created in 2010, and we utilize every aspect of creative design to strategy to sales implementation and really product formulation, the whole nine yards. So I had been doing this for about 14 years for other people, for clients, small, medium, and large. So we've done it for private
Hmm.
equity. We've done it for just family-owned wineries, because most wineries are family-owned. There aren't that many publicly traded companies in the space, spirits companies, and all that. And in 2017, when we were really testing out what was possible, we were approached by a private equity group, and they made an acquisition with respect to real estate. And along with that real estate, they had a distillery, and they weren't quite sure what to do with it and how to monetize it best. They had an idea, but it required execution and scaling and all the things that they were not really familiar with in terms of the industry. And we created that brand, and that brand had an over $200 million exit in 5 year window. We did the entire strategy, the pricing, you name it, implementation, Salesforce hiring, everything. And that was a soup to nuts testing of the entire process that we were putting in place. Um, and so we did things that weren't typical. This particular spirit didn't have a celebrity. I wasn't looking for one. We were really being strategic about how to scale this. And sure enough, it had its first exit. I think it's going to have $1 billion exit in the coming couple of years. So that was very fun. And then having worked with major clients, that everybody from LVMH to leading European family-owned wine companies, you do gain a great deal of insight as to what things work and what don't. So it's not just your own experience, it's also taking in all the client experience over the years. That leads to some insane insight. So what I've also discovered is that very often clients don't actually do what you create the strategy for. There are missed opportunities in terms of execution, and I gave this an awful lot of thought, that I think it was time for me to create my own brands. First and foremost, because I see a gap in the market. So in this particular case, I have a background in nutrition psychology, and fitness, really my whole life as an athlete. Two of my kids were nationally ranked athletes, and all three were very active. So I've always paid attention in the home, the type of food that we made, and as a European, almost everything was homemade. So, but even with that, ingredients matter, and ingredients matter more today than ever before. We have GMO products. We have all sorts of things that are just not, for me, hitting the health markers. So I gave, I gave it a whirl in the market. I really tried to find products and drinks, especially, that were going to be somehow aligned with my lifestyle. And I ran into a lot of brick walls with that. So I created a product, which is the one I referred to earlier, coming to market in 6-8 weeks. I think the samples arrived today. So I'm just excited to share it with people, because first and foremost, I made it for myself.
Hmm. Yeah. No, this is really good. This is a good spot to pause because you've kind of painted the picture for us, the people you've worked with and the skill that you've achieved. But let's go back then to what you mentioned at the beginning, which was you put your career on hold basically to raise your kids. So this is the main reason I want to ask you because you have achieved so much, but you've had also this very strong focus on raising the family. And as Catholics, kind of we have this perspective that our vocation in life comes before our vocation in the world, right? Our careers. So can you talk about that perspective as a Catholic woman and deciding like how did you go through that mentally?
It it came down to just thinking about the practical things. Who is going to take care of this baby? And the answer was, I'm not letting anybody touch her. And so and I was only 24 at that point. And the realization was, I that's all I really want to do right now is having this child and spending time with her. And then my if I'm home with one, might as well be home with two, and and so on. But I did want to do something to keep myself active somehow, professionally speaking, in some way. And a natural place that I gravitated to, because I was involved in this, is the New York City charitable circuit. So there are a lot of social organizations that I was co-chair, or I was on the committees for. And so I learned an awful lot about the power of doing that and giving back. Um, so I was thinking I could stay active and be involved on that front, on the nonprofit front. What happened actually was not something I could have anticipated with respect to creating a U.S. trade organization and all that. I just knew that I didn't want to contribute too much time to it. I wanted to work for me on my schedule, but I also wanted to keep a hand in somehow some sort of a professional zone. So as I was just trying to figure out what my life needed to look like as a mom, I wanted to make sure that whatever I did wasn't going to supersede what I wanted to do as a mother and as a full-time homemaker. So it was a balancing act. Um, and I remember thinking, oh, I could do this 3 mornings, maybe 4 hours, have a babysitter come in for a little bit. And I was so efficient because as a mom, you learn to be very efficient in a short time. You just get an awful lot done. It's like 4 hours I get to pay attention to something. It was amazing. And sure enough, though, the entrepreneurial side of me kicked in because I built it into a very serious organization, and we had impact on trade and we had an impact on investment. And I worked with the chairman of some of the leading Fortune 500 companies, the White House, USAID, USTDA, OPIC, Exim Bank, the equivalents on the other side, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So I wound up tapping all these unbelievable resources and getting an education in international trade and business development from a top-down level. So then I'm having my third child, and meanwhile this thing is growing and really growing, and I am finding the parts of working with government as a nonprofit to get to a frustration level where I saw some of the things that were happening that I didn't care for. B, when you think of a government change, you have to think of it in pyramid terms. The top of the pyramid can be cut off when you have a government change, but the rest of the infrastructure is there. The people are there. The ones that don't want to get things done are there. So there are a couple of different aspects to the challenges of working with governments. And one of them was always, every time I had built a really good relationship with one government and all the ministers, the secretaries of state, or whatever they were, regime change. And then you have to, and they bring in their own people. Now you've got gatekeepers because nobody wants to follow through on what the previous guys did. So I had enough, and I just took a step back with my third, and I realized, okay, I now want to. If I'm putting this kind of work, then this needs to be for profit, and we have a growing family. And how do I convert this into the next stage of my life? And to your point about how I was thinking about it and how it evolved for me, it's some people have a plan. Some people have a very clear plan of what they think they'll do. In my case, because technology was also impacting things, there wasn't a way to work remotely at that time. Um, I mean, you could finally see laptops and such, but I still remember the gateway computers, the gigantic IBMs, whatever. So the flexibility today is completely different for families than what it was for me. Although I did carve out somehow a work and family balance because I was fighting for that. I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be with the kids and the family. I wanted to make dinner, and I wanted to be at their events and the little things. And at the same time, I knew that this was going to become important for me. And is there anything I can build here? Because my resume didn't translate into a conventional resume of a career woman. And that's one of the big challenges that is still the same for women today. Um, and that's the salary history. The salary history is a real downer because even though I was doing this high profile work, I wasn't, I wasn't making a salary. I wasn't actually, it was a nonprofit. It was actually a nonprofit where the principal didn't even take a salary.
Yeah.
In fact, we put money into it, if anything. So it's challenging because if you want to re-enter the workforce later, as a woman, your salary range and the jobs that are available are going to be a conversation.
Hmm.
And so even though I worked my way into the workforce at a later stage, um, it wasn't what it would have been had I stayed the course in a conventional role. But that was a choice.
So in other words, perhaps the path of entrepreneurship makes more sense because you still have the value, right? Other people don't perceive the value, but you can just present the value in a different way, and you can do it in a way that you can still have your time for your family. Is that what you would? That's how
I
you would
think
put it?
so. Today, yes. So these options weren't there. I couldn't run a remote business that readily. Uh, Although I wound up building one because I was hired by a European company who had their European operations centered there, but they wanted to export their portfolio of wine to the US. So we had to build a company. And I took on that project. I did that work for 5 years and really learned about building a business, and carved my way into the wine and spirit space very, specifically. So that was a great opportunity, but I had to be entrepreneurial in doing that.
Hmm.
And then I decided I had to get some conventional experience in the sector, and I wound up going inside the top distribution company. It's a $50 billion revenue privately held company, and I was actually brought in by the regional president at that time because he had seen my work and I built a reputation, and but I know now that I was getting half the salary that people were
Yeah.
getting, for that role. And I became their top salesperson to boot. So it, and then the compensation improved, but I never made that
Hmm.
leap. So I realized at a juncture about 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, that if I really wanted to improve my finances, it wasn't going to be through the corporate ladder. I was I was on a different time cycle. And so I took all my knowledge, left to start FMG. That was the first company I created. And I believed and I bet on myself.
Hey there, quick interruption. If you're looking for support as your business grows, consider using Paraclete VA. This is a project that my EA and I are doing where we are vetting highly talented Catholic virtual assistants, primarily from the Philippines, and helping them get jobs with Catholic employers. We're very passionate about this because Karen has many of her connections, constantly asking her if she knows any Catholic business owners that they could work for. The main reason being their current employers often either treat them very poorly or these businesses are involved in things that are not really, in line with their Catholic morals. But they can't just quit. They have families to feed, so they're looking for new opportunities. If you are interested, reach out by sending us an email to dearcfpod@gmail.com with a little bit about what you're looking for, what skill set you need, and then we will make some introductions. If you end up hiring somebody, you pay us a finder's fee of $500 and a success fee of $500 if you're still happy after 30 days. Please keep in mind, we are not an employer of record. We do not employ them directly. You will pay them. We can help you facilitate best practices there, but we are a finder's agency. So if this is something you're interested in, reach out today, dearcfpod@gmail.com, and we will hopefully get you rocking and rolling. All right, back to the show. Yeah. What role did you doing work like in the nonprofit situation as well as other things? How did this I don't know the way to phrase this, like how did it affect your kids and seeing you work and being able to see you kind of do things rather than, just kind of taking care of the house only?
Yeah, so it was good, bad, and ugly. It was all of the above, because I did have quite a bit of travel. I did have quite a bit of international travel. Some of that was high profile, so that was very cool for my kids. They also heard about things, whether it was a specific business deal that was happening or something they read about in one of the papers that I was being featured in or publications. Whether it was here or in Europe. It was interesting for them. But my youngest, because when she was born is when my work started to accelerate. Um, and I wound up spending about 10 days out of every 6 weeks in Europe. And she was like, Mommy, when do you stop that?
Hmm.
So I wound up going conventional and local, and I took a position that was based out of New York, New Jersey, and she was extremely happy. So, there are good impacts, there are some questionable impacts, and you just have to do what's best for the family
Hmm.
all around.
Yeah. So I guess, do you have any particular framework, the way you would kind of structure it? You say, listen, for Catholic women generally who, they know they're called to be a mother and a wife. How should they approach entrepreneurship? What are kind of the principles that you would say that you think should be for most people something they consider?
Yeah. So it does depend, where your opportunities lie. And I would say that a lot of it has to do with when you're going to be a parent. So are you going to be a 24-year-old mom? Because that's a very different answer than somebody who's 34 and is at a different stage of a career they've already built and now they're going into something else. So I don't think that there is a singular answer. What I would I would advocate for, first of all, having kids early. Just my experience is, my kids were all grown where people were still having small children. And in fact, my oldest daughter became my business partner as she graduated out of the university, which, we've been business partners for 15 years, and it's kind of crazy, but it worked for us. So to me, it does come down to the life decisions you're making about the family first, and then looking at what stage of that child rearing process can you activate a business of your own. So there are more demands when the kids are very little. Is there something that can be done at that stage? Maybe, but maybe is it that, you have a couple of kids and you wait until they're 4 or 5 and then really start in. So I think it's not so much about the entrepreneurial side. You can today create a business out of anything at any point in
Mm-hmm.
time. So it's no longer that limitation. The central question is, when are you going to um, have that family and have those children?
Yeah, I like the fact that I guess there's no one size fits all answer because I think it's common to want to, especially as Catholics, to be like split hairs and to be prescriptive, like here's the rules, follow the rules, but it is different for every person. And I think this is something I've thought about a bit with some of the saints. Like there are saints who, like Saint Joan of Arc, or Saint Teresa of Lisieux, who you would, a lot of people be like, oh, that's not women's not supposed to do that. That's not a thing. But it's like, well, they clearly did. They were saints, and they impacted millions of people's lives, right, over the course of history. So don't have these limitations on what is possible or what is allowed because God speaks to each of us individually. So I definitely I appreciate that. One thing I am curious about is, did your experience of being an entrepreneur, especially not necessarily just the career work, but the entrepreneurship piece, did that do you think that this shaped your children in a certain way that gave them a different perspective on the world? Because I've noticed that it seems most people who become entrepreneurs have had some direct family experience with it, which kind of led them to explore or to kind of scratch at that thing. Any thoughts there?
Yes, actually, I come from a family where that was not the case. My father was Fortune 500 and managing director, and spent his entire career there. And and my mom was stay-at-home mom, and she worked early on at the very early stages of my life, and then never again. So she was stay-at-home, certainly from the time she came to this country. Um, but you know, it it is it is very interesting to think about how you are impacted from the family, because other parts of my family were entrepreneurs. But when I started with my first company, I wasn't even thinking of being an entrepreneur. This is a new thing. This is a new buzzword. I created a small business. I was operating a small business. I was operating an agency. So it wasn't so much that I was going to be this, entrepreneur brand. It was more about building a business that is going to be sustainable and helpful for my family. And that was the goal there. It wasn't that I had some grand ambition necessarily. It was like, how do I help take care of my family? And and so this entrepreneur culture has evolved in the last 7, 8 years, maybe 10.
Hmm.
This language, and now everybody is spewing it, and that's great because it is what it is. Except small businesses have been entrepreneurs for 200 years, but they were just, let me sell this to make that so I can pay my bills and take care of my family. So
It's always been in service of that. I think that has been the history of entrepreneurship is like we work, right? We're called by God to work. Work is good for us. It's good for mankind.
mhm.
But I feel a little bit disgusted by how nowadays it's all about like, oh, how can I just extract money from people? Like, how can I make $10 million and then have a yacht and flex it on people? It's like, well, that's not the point of it, right? Like, that's not really the point. The point is for employment. It's for good work to provide for your family, and then to help those around you. Because I'm not a history buff, but I would venture to assume that it's because of entrepreneurs primarily that people have had employment in general, right? These other people who didn't have that spark in them, uh, to be able to provide for their families.
um, it's taken, so the entrepreneur community of being a founder, of whatever, it's it's become so siloed into this different type of a life that people are envisioning. What it really is grind, commitment, innovation, And you have to know every aspect of what you're doing, whether you wind up executing that or not. You really have to build that knowledge base. And to me, and this is where I part ways with a lot of what's going on in the market. Um, Many of the people are raising capital for entrepreneurial activity, and I'm not saying you can't or you shouldn't. It depends on the validity of the idea. But a lot of people that are raising a ton of money are like 24 years old, 25 years old, and I would say I don't care how much of a genius you are, you simply haven't had the exposure to the way that business works on deeper levels. And those things actually impact good decision making down the road. Um, so I think it's very important to get formal work environment into the mix
Hmm.
before you become whatever that entrepreneurial role is that you envision, simply because the level of insight, information, education that you're going to get in the real world, which is not school based,
Hmm.
it's true experience that is going to have a huge impact on the success of what you're doing, which is why most successful entrepreneurs are like 45 and up, 50 and up,
Yeah.
which is not the noise
Is that
that
what
you
you
hear.
hear, right? Like you're always
Yeah,
hearing a 21-year-old, graduate
like
from Stanford or something, raising
no, no.
all this money, especially with AI right now. No, this I think about this often because with my work with recruiting with early stage companies, the usually it's the very young entrepreneurs are the ones who have the most immature perspective on talent and employees and how to treat them. And there's definitely some that succeed, but it feels like the ones who really succeed are the ones who learned how not to treat people first, and then they learned, oh, this is how we do it. But on the other hand, there's only you learn through doing, and the idea of like, hey, I learned these things about how to be an entrepreneur, but then you don't really learn them until you actually are an entrepreneur. This was for me. I consumed all of the business content, all of the entrepreneur content, and it wasn't until actually being in the seat that I was like, oh, now I start to understand some of this stuff, and it actually makes sense. But no, I feel like this is it's a good thing to discuss and have people consider that they don't have to rush out into being an entrepreneur. It's not about the glamour, right? It's about the you should be called to it. I think as Catholics, especially, we should consider that fact. Are we feeling some kind of like tug in our hearts to go towards this thing? Um, Speaking of going towards something, if I really would love to get your perspective on this. If you were raising young kids now, okay, in the current world with what we have today, what are some of the business ideas that you would consider to pursue? What are some of the things you would think about?
That's so interesting because I was having ideas when my kids were little, and I even started down the path of some of them, and um, it's it's very fun to think about because there are the functional opportunities which come from as a mother, you're doing things with your kids and you become frustrated when something should work a certain way and it doesn't, or there isn't a solution for it. I think one of the game changers for me was the hook around the baby bottles that kept it from my daughter being able to throw it on the ground. So that was a game changer. It was this little thing that was produced, I'm sure, for 5 cents in China somewhere, but it was a game changer. That and the pacifier clip, it was like, oh, now, she's not going to throw it on the ground. So there are things, and I've seen them with babies today that I thought back then, oh, they really need to do something like this or solve for this problem. So those are the child, day everyday issues that as a parent you come across, and I would look at that. Um, I don't know what specifically today because I'm not in that mix. The other thing I would look at, and this is very much related to where the world is today. If I were raising my children now, I would homeschool them. So that would change my entire approach to entrepreneurship because that would take up an immense amount of time. And there would not be room for me to go and do something else. However, I would probably find something within the online schooling or the homeschooling community that could be a gap that could be identified, that could dovetail into the work I would be doing with the kids and solve on that level, whether it be a software or it be some kind of service, something around the homeschooling elements, because I simply would not put my kids into um, schools. And even Catholic schools, I think, have been infiltrated in many ways.
Hmm.
And so I would want greater control over the information they're getting about the world.
Yeah, and I think so. So broadly speaking, putting yourself in the circumstance that you're in, and then just solving the problems that you have to face, the problems you have to
Yes.
deal with. Now, and obviously, you mentioned earlier that there wasn't an opportunity to do so many things remote. But I mean, in today's world, yes, there's people calling, people back to the office, but remote is completely natural to people, to almost everybody, right? It's
Yeah.
very, very natural unless you have exposure to working like in a factory or something. It's very natural, and I think there's so many opportunities. There's also literally truckloads of content on the internet on how to make money online. So there's no excuse here, right? The internet has democratized this all for us, right? So I appreciate that perspective. You have some good stories about how to get in touch with people. So if somebody is in this circumstance of like, hey, I'm gonna start this business. I'm gonna do whatever it is, but I want to go straight to the top levels. How can I get in touch with these people? Because you have some pretty good stories here.
Yeah, actually, that's sort of been a superpower I've developed over the years. It's how I started. So I recognize that the fastest path to a good decision or a decision is to really hit the decision maker and hit it at the highest possible level that I can. And so I would say creativity, and first of all, the understanding that that's what you need to do, because people don't identify that as the path. They go to the middle rank or the appropriate channels. I never went with appropriate channels because to me they were not appropriate. They were appropriate for getting derailed and
Mm,
for the time suck that they took up and the power trips that those middle management figures would be stonewalling, any creative idea. And so I recognize that I have to go to the key decision maker at the very top, and that meant president, CEO, whatever. And it didn't matter the size of the company or the project or the country for that matter. It's getting to that level. First of all, is an intention. Second, you have to understand your target and how they, in what context they operate. Do they have handlers? Who are the handlers? How do you get food to them and all that? And then start to get creative. And some of the things I did back then, are no longer as exciting because there are different ways of getting through. But creativity for sure. And also, you have to have a really good proposition. You
mm,
really, like, I just got something from somebody wanting to go to very a senior level person, a very senior person. And I looked at it and there's no way I'm taking that to anybody because it's just not well flushed out and it's confusing. So you have to have a really good proposition. What do you want? How is this going to benefit them? And what I've also recognized in my experience with all the senior level management, executive leadership, and government figures is if you engage their imagination, they can see past the issues that a middle management level figure would throw out and block with. Um, because CEOs have that imagination. So if you can tap it with something, they will be able to give a decision very fast, and they will also be able to put it in the hands of the right people, and it's coming from top down. So the process is accelerated in my experience, and you actually get to the people that you should be talking to rapidly.
No, that's really powerful advice. I like that piece about the vision. I've never thought about this. That the middle managers is not that they are trying necessarily to shoot things down, but they just don't have the same perspective, right? So that's really interesting. Um, Out of curiosity, what would you say? I'm assuming you've encountered you've referenced maybe a couple of them already, but you've probably as a woman in your line of business, and just probably in general, you've probably encountered a number of barriers, and you've overcome a lot of them. So, what were the core barriers that you faced, and how did you overcome those? As advice to other, women who are looking to go down this route.
Yeah, so I I mean, I think one of the biggest barriers was even just getting the job.
Mm,
And you don't even know that you're getting it or not getting, or why you're not getting it. When I was trying to break in from raising kids and running nonprofits, and regardless of the work that I did and how cool that was, still getting into a formal role within a company, that was definitely a challenge. So in my industry, I had to earn my stripes within. And so once I could crack that, I became a top executive. So there were no more barriers because my performance proved out every single day. And it was really funny. There were all sorts of rumors why I was getting promoted left and right, but every morning at 6 a.m., all the numbers came out for every single person in the company, and mine were just speaking for themselves. So I think having that was very helpful. The the other big challenge was trying to improve my salary level, because again, I came in without that history, and that was um, that was definitely a challenge. So I would love to see for women a greater path to parity. Uh, I think just because you spent time raising your children, you should not be held back with respect to earnings. And then in the entrepreneurial side, I do believe that the biggest challenge, and this is across the board for women, and I see it every day, we're raising capital for the new brand that is being launched, and I have raised money successfully before, but it's for women less than 2.4% of the total capital raised. So that's an egregious number. That is practically zero. So women entrepreneurs are just not getting the funding.
hmm Yeah. No, I've seen some numbers around this, but I've also seen the fact that typically female founders actually outperform male founders
They
in a
do.
lot of cases.
They do.
So
We're
I don't.
profitable first.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get to profitability way faster. And and actually, I don't think it's anybody's fault. Well, I shouldn't say it's not anybody's fault. I do have some theories about why this is happening, but it's not anyone's direct fault here. It's not this anti-female culture or anything. Women do not, in my view, women do not have the networks, the natural networks that men have built on golf courses in their careers, where they say, hey, Jack, I just put in 200,000 because Joe's opening a restaurant. I want to go in on that. Do you want to go in on that too? Yeah, sure. And before the round is over, those four people that played that round of golf in 8 hours have just invested a cool 800,000 into $1 million round
hmm
before they left the golf course,
Yeah.
right? Women
Yeah.
just don't have that. We're going to say, oh, I get, you know what? Um, Chrissy needs piano lessons, so we're going to do that, and Nick needs tennis lessons, and we're going to do that, and we're going to spend on private school, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that for the kids.
hmm
And so women's values and their networks and the way that they deal with money at home because I'm not even sure that that guy on the golf course asked his wife. In fact, he didn't. He's just going to put the money into Jack's restaurant.
Hmm.
All
Yeah.
of them are. So it's a different evolution of how women are thinking about, do we invest in each other? Do we invest in just a really good business idea? It doesn't matter if it's male or female,
Hmm.
but the female network doesn't go around putting
The same way.
$50,000,
Yeah.
100,000, $200,000 of the family money
Hmm.
into something outside of the family.
Yeah, I can just imagine all of the various biases and reasons for this, right? Why it becomes difficult. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think this would be very helpful for many people. Um, One thing, so let's start wrapping up with this one. Is what have been the biggest spiritual lessons for you through entrepreneurship? Like, how have you come closer to God through the experience of building businesses?
In moments where you feel complete and utter failure, I think it's the sharpest connection, because that's when you don't really have a safety net of any sorts, because there is really no one to talk to. It is you. It is just you with all of it. And and I'm not saying you can't have a therapist or a social circle or family or whatever, but it's any entrepreneur that's been through the journey knows that moment. And I think if you can develop the conversation throughout your life, in those moments when you're really hitting the wall, it's it's so much easier to work through it than if you are starting with that particular emergency and like, I need something beyond what is available. And it's that intangible knowledge that I I call faith, that somebody is standing with me.
Hmm. Yeah, the way I try to view it is that, for me particularly, it felt like I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it wasn't until I felt like God was like kind of slapping me in the face saying, "Hey, this is your chance, like go do it," that I really took the leap. And then once I did that, I remembered that because I was close enough to it. So even in the very, very early days when it was like, "Oh man, is this gonna work?" It was very close to me that I was like, "Oh, he just told me I have to go," right? So it's like I'm not gonna, I'm not going to walk back the path. I know this is, I got to give it a shot at the bare minimum, right? So I appreciate that perspective. Um, what are in your view, is the number one thing that entrepreneurs and CEOs can do to run their business like a saint?
I think you have to take it one day at a time. And I believe the journey for just about all saints have been along those lines. And I think that's very biblical. It is something that, you know, we encounter each time when we're trying to get ahead of ourselves. And it's just handle today, just focus in on today. And it ties into the fear factor too, because as fear is mentioned, I don't know how many, it's, I think, the most mentioned word in the Bible. And be not afraid and all that. And I'm sure that every single anybody who's ever become a saint or lives like one has encountered that overwhelming amount of fear that they have to get past. And in that way, building, building your business and building your entrepreneurial life in a way where you just don't let that fear stop you.
Yeah, well, that's powerful. I appreciate that. And then last thing would be for you, what is one thing that you wish really existed in the Catholic entrepreneurship ecosystem?
I believe where we have a gigantic gap that other people have covered is really funding and venture funding for Catholic businesses, Catholic entrepreneurs, and an ecosystem for doing it. And I'm not talking about $5,000 checks. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about serious funding because I've looked at other communities and other religions that have, whether it's Mormon, Jewish, whatever, where they've really pulled together and they support each other and they have built very, very powerful communities. We are the greatest community on earth, and we need to start thinking about it. And the reason that's important is because ultimately, those companies that become successful then have the way to give back. We're not
Hmm.
building that giving back ecosystem, and we're
Which
not
is
going
which
to
is
do it without
crazy.
it.
It's
Yeah.
crazy because of considering if you consider the community itself, like the whole nature of Catholicism, we should be the most generous community giving back. We should be the most willing to forego, the luxuries of life in order to help kind of fund the church or fund help people come out of the dumps. And it doesn't seem like it's happening. I wonder. I think about this a lot, and my understanding is that the reason it happens mostly is because there's so much momentum with religion in general is that if you are raised in it, a lot of times you just kind of keep doing it. And so there's many people who are part of the faith who haven't truly had this conversion deeply about understanding what it means to be Catholic. And as a result, they're culturally there, but they're not really like internalizing what it means to be Catholic. If they had, they would look a lot more like St. Paul. They'd be out there kind of, word on the street, telling people what's going on and sharing the news with other people. So this is what I really hope this project helps achieve is get people to think more about this because it's so easy to be on autopilot, right? And there's so many distractions in life that we can just easily do our thing and be okay with it and think, hey, I'm a good person. I pay my employees well. But yet, you're taking all this extra money when you sell your business and you're, buying something you do not need when you could invest it to the community or to your employees somehow.
I'm not even necessarily talking about, sacrifice or not doing this or that. There's plenty of disposable,
Hmm.
capital available in the Catholic community worldwide. And we need a mechanism
Hmm.
and a place that says this particular fund is going to fund Catholic entrepreneurs. And this is not that they're doing, they're building something Catholic per se. They're building a business on Catholic principles, yes, but the company
Yeah.
can be anything. But we want to support it because I think a lot of Catholics do have this, and I know I did myself. It's like having money, or the money conversation comes up, and it's we shouldn't have it. We should give it away. We should, but it's not like create it, grow it, so we can put it to work. And I'm seeing other communities putting it to work, and it's not working for us.
Hmm. Well, it's the same principle of the parable of the talents, right? Like they
Yeah.
didn't bury their. I mean, there were some people who buried their talents in the sand, but that was not right. It was the people who had given much. They were, put over. I forget exactly the terminology. They were
Mm.
supposed to manage, 10 cities or whatever. And this is the fact that if anybody has achieved financial success, I think they have a responsibility to continue using this for the glory of God. And you can just look at people like Tom Monahan
Yeah.
and the things that they've done or that he's done. This is an example. So maybe someday I'll get Tom on the show. I need somebody to give me an intro to him. But Monica, this has been really a pleasure having you on. We could definitely talk about many other things, and we could go for a long time. But I really appreciate your perspective on things. And again, love what you're doing. So keep up the good work, and we'll see how your launch goes. We'll have to bring you on at some point to talk about that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so
God
much for
bless.
having me. Take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you really enjoyed this, leave us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. And if not already, give us a follow on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as we can. And be sure to subscribe to The Saintly CEO, our free weekly newsletter that, in under 1,000 words, will help you run your business like a saint and help you discover other Catholic entrepreneurs with our curated list of these folks. And finally, if you are looking for a group of other Catholic entrepreneurs, consider joining our Catholic Founders Guild. This is a group of other Catholic entrepreneurs that meets on a regular basis to work through each other's kind of business challenges, learn from each other. It's just a really nice place to go to speak about challenges in a way that nobody else does, right? Other business owners, they may not have the faith kind of really there with them, or they may be even Christian, but they don't quite have the security or the specifics that we are looking for as Catholics with Dogma. Okay, so it is $10 a month or $100 a year. So just go to our Substack and upgrade to paid. Any of those tiers will work to get you into this peer group. And by doing this, you will also get access to all of our paywalled content as well. So if this is something of interest to you, feel called to, looking for a group of people, a group of peers, consider joining the Catholic Founders Guild today, $10 a month or $100 a year. And hopefully we'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and see you next time.